Hello, welcome to Book and Lounge, a podcast that helps you find your next great read. If you're enjoying the podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, download, and share with your friends, family, and colleagues. Your support really means a lot to us. The more you share, the more we can bring more exciting episodes to you. Now let's get back to today's episode. Thanks, Taiwo and Yvonne, for joining. We are discussing In the Ditch by, how do you pronounce the name, Taiwo?
Buchi Emecheta.
Emecheta. How do you say her first name?
Buchi.
Buchi.
Although she's not from my part of Nigeria, so I'm probably not pronouncing it accurately anyway.
Well, I think you're doing it better than most of us would, so good to go. So yeah, and it's set in the 1960s or 70s, I can't remember now, on an estate somewhere in London. And it's semi-autobiographical. She does say in the preface that she's changed some of the names, but actually these are based on events that have happened. So it basically follows the life of this young... Oh, Yvonne's dropped off.
No, it is not the government tracking me. it's a simple case of technology. My computer had no power. Obviously, I've been using it without plugging it in, so it just went blank. Sorry about that.
No, you kind of were frozen, and I was just thinking, because you were sitting very still, and I was like, "Oh, Yvonne's being really attentive to this."
I cut off when you were summarizing about set in the 60s, about a young lady, and then I didn't hear the rest of it.
Okay, well, I'll start again.
Sorry.
It's set in the 1960s and follows the life of a young Nigerian mother of 5. She's about 26. She's raising her kids on her own, and she has split up from her husband. She's renting a flat from a Nigerian landlord, or actually not even a flat, she's renting a room from a Nigerian landlord when we meet her. And then basically the story follows her life, I think for a period of about a couple of years, and basically how she gets on. So those are the whole lot of issues which you're going to come on to discuss. But before we get on to that, I guess, had any of you read any of Buchi Emecheta's books?
I have her books,
Uh-huh.
but I haven't read them.
Okay. So would you be inspired to read them then after this one?
Yes. Because it's it's sort of quite a simple, straightforward sort of read.
Yeah.
I think it took me less than a day to read this book.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So,
Fast.
I think I have Second Class Citizen sitting on my shelf somewhere. But I think what's kind of always stopped me from reading her books is the titles. Because when I saw In the Ditch, I'm like, oh my God, another really heavy book. And also when I saw the description of what the story is about. And so I was really pleasantly surprised when I picked it up and then started reading it. And then after the first chapter, I was absolutely laughing. Was not expecting that at all. And yeah, definitely going to pick up the next one. And so what did you guys think of the book?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You mentioned that Adaobi, the protagonist, is we pick her up when she's left her husband, but you said that there's a book where she's with her husband. What's that one called?
Second Class Citizen.
Okay, I'm going to have to read that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting enough, I wasn't even interested in where her husband was, why she left, why she's been. And I think it's because the book itself I found really quite warm, human, funny, very sad. Just a very human, very touching story, and just opened my world to the hardships and the whole thing about social welfare. An area, I guess, that I'm not as familiar with because I came into this country many years later as a working adult. Mm-hmm. So it's just an area I'm completely... And you sort of hear sound bites in the newspapers or in the media about people that are on welfare. without really the human stories. So I found this really warm, sort of entertaining, funny, but it also incredibly sad.
It's interesting that you say that it was sad, but I think I'll come back to you on that once we've heard what Taiwo thinks or thought of the book.
But I found it warm in the same way that Yvonne did, but not really sad in the sense that it was quite uplifting, because although she went through trials and tribulations, she seemed to come out the other end on a positive footing. So I guess her adversity made her stronger in some ways. So it's quite hopeful to me, because I mean, it didn't end on a downer. It seemed to end on a positive note.
And Yvonne, why did you find it sad? Because I'm kind of with Taiwo on this. The issues that she was describing was, I mean, they were really distressful situations sometimes, but the manner in which she put it together, I didn't feel it was heavy, and I didn't actually feel sad.
And it's funny, I felt sad not particularly for her. I think I started connecting with a lot of the other characters, and just the entire social welfare situation, that how it's very easy to get trapped in it. And then even when there's light at the end of the tunnel, you almost want to stay in the ditch. It's scary. And I was thinking actually of the Stockholm Syndrome, that psychology where the victim identifies with the captor. You know, that kept on playing in my mind, because right at the end, you know, they all have the opportunity to start again and to be in a better environment, but I think fear grips you, and I think the whole thing, and it is not even just about people in that situation. I think just change can be quite challenging and traumatic for people, and I found it difficult for this group of people, because I was worried. I was like, how are they? In fact, I wasn't worried about her in particular, because I knew she'd go off and fly and be the, you know, the educated young lady that she, and, you know, inspirational and had aspirations. But for the rest of them, I just thought, my God, it is a cycle. And then you have the young girl at the end who then announces that she's pregnant. And it's just that, I suppose the sadness was really around the welfare system, and it perpetuates the same behaviors over and over again. And these are the stories I heard when I arrived into this country 25 years ago, and I for sure probably still happening today. And this is 40 years ago. I think that's where my sadness really sort of came from.
I guess just for context, so Ada eventually is rehoused. So she's living with this Nigerian landlord who's overcharging her, and then she just goes to the council house or council office and gets herself rehoused. She just takes the first place that she's given without even looking at it. It's where she goes on to call the ditch, because everybody, not everybody, almost everybody who's living there is on some kind of welfare benefit, because if they work, then their benefit is deducted. And the more of them there are, so if they're a couple, for example, the husband's working, the husband's benefits will be taken into consideration when they're offering them benefits. So they're basically left with no choice really but to just stay at home and claim the benefits to be able to pay the rent and to be able to pay their bills. And Ada, when she joins this community, she's actually studying part-time in the evenings. So she leaves her children at home by themselves and goes to class in the evening. And obviously the neighbors, not necessarily, they're not happy, first of all, that a Black woman has moved next door. And then secondly, they kind of report her that she's going out and she's leaving the kids at home by themselves. And so she has to abandon her course. In fact, even then, she had a job. She was going to work.
Yes.
But she couldn't afford, with 5 children, she really couldn't afford to be working. going to class, and then looking after the 5 kids. And so she...
Or getting a childminder.
Sorry?
Or getting a childminder. I don't think she could afford a childminder.
Yeah. And I don't even know that she would have thought about getting a childminder at that point, or even whether knew where to go to get a childminder. But so that's the situation she is in when she's at the ditch. And then we see how she learns the system in the ditch and how to work the system or not work the system and how to survive in the ditch. And the issues and themes that really come out in this book are those of poverty and survival. And how well do you think that the author portrays those themes? People living in squalor and their survival. What is it that motivates them to survive, and how do they survive?
I think the author captures it well, because there are different characters and they have different approaches. So the protagonist, Ada Obi, is the kind of, maybe you could call her upwardly mobile, at least not just economically, not just socially, but certainly educationally. She's someone that is aspiring. She's someone that is striving. She's someone that doesn't fully understand the system, but she has an idea of where she wants to get to in life, which is to gain an education, to have economic independence, so to have a job, and to raise her family on her own without her husband for whatever reason, she and her husband are split up. Then the other extreme, I guess, is the people who maybe for generations, they have no intention of working, they have no particular interest in education or maybe further education beyond the basic compulsory education of the day. And they're just there to not milk the system, but they're there to make use of the system. So whatever is available to them, whatever they are entitled to, they want to receive that and live their life accordingly. Without being too judgmental, it's not necessarily, or it's not wholly an issue of they're just milking the system. There's also an issue of they understand the system to a large extent, and they realize that if they move out of the system, as Ada is trying to do, or Ada has been striving to do, they are less well off materially or financially. They're less well off. So they therefore remain in the system, even though there's a cost. So there's a cost whether you're in the system, and there's a cost whether you strive and you get out of the system. Either way, but you have to make a decision. You have to decide where you're better off. So there's a whole range of characters. Sorry. No, I'm just saying there's a whole range of characters that Buchi Emecheta uses as maybe devices to talk about this range of people in society and how they relate to the welfare state and the structures that are in place.
So with the wealth of characters then, so we have Ada, who you've explained, who's upwardly mobile and wants to work and wants to make something of a life. And you have the Williamses, who, I think that they were the Williamses, who were working. And then they were moved.
The son, I think the son got a job, and then they were the first ones to move out of the ditch.
Yeah. And then you have, I can't remember the name of the family now, but the West Indian family that were moved into
Cook. I think Mrs. Cook. Jamaican. Cook.
Yeah. So they were moved, and then they didn't like where they were moved to, and so they were actually moving to a smaller, privately rented property. They were moving because they couldn't afford where they'd been moved to, and they were moving into a smaller property so that they could actually save money and then send money back home to Jamaica. And one of the characters just couldn't understand why you would move out of a council place, which in a way, I guess I understand, because rents are generally lower in council places. And also it's a secure tenancy, unless you do something really bad to get yourself kicked out. You've got a secure tenancy for life. So I can understand why Whoopi, I think it was Whoopi who was like, how can you want to move out of your council place to go and then rent privately? But then you have the Cookses who will actually be upwardly mobile. They want to save as much money as they can and then go and build something better for themselves in Jamaica. So there's a whole host of characters. But coming back to the welfare system, so the Cook don't necessarily want them to benefit or to be on the welfare system for the rest of their lives. And then you have the likes of Whoopi, who that's all they know. Like, I kind of wanted to explore this issue of, well, why is it that Whoopi and the O'Neills and the likes think the way they do, and why is it that the Jamaican and then the Nigerian woman, why do they think differently?
I don't know, but I think that the mindset of an African person who's lived in Africa might be slightly different from someone an English woman who probably has born and raised in a council place. I mean, in Africa, if you don't have a dollar, you don't have a dollar. As in, there is no safety net.
Yes.
So already it's within us to work, to strive, to be better, and to want to do better. And there's pride associated with improving yourself. Now, if you've grown up in an environment where your parents haven't worked, your grandparents haven't worked, you haven't got the examples where work pays or work is one of the core values. But then it's also tied in with the poverty, because what really struck me about the novel was, I mean, when they're literally talking about, well, it's £4. If I earn another £4 more, then I'm out. It's only, when she was looking for a cleaning job, when Ada was looking for a cleaning job, and she was accepting to be paid just £2, and I was thinking, my goodness, the level of poverty where just one extra pound or two makes a whole difference, whether you can heat up your home, whether your children are wetting their bed because they're too cold to get out and go to the toilet. Yeah, I was like, yeah, poverty is real.
Yeah, but Yvonne, don't you think that hasn't really changed? Because what you're talking about, in a sense, is the cliff edge. So rather than a taper, it's a cliff edge. It's a very steep cliff edge whereby if you're a couple of pennies over a certain limit financially, then your benefits are just chopped. And
Yes.
That's what they were talking about recently, weren't they, with the carers allowance and all the tackle that happened with that. So it's the same thing. They generally don't taper these benefits. They generally just, it's a cliff edge, and then when you're over, you're over.
I worked in the food industry for many, many years, and I've worked with mothers who will say, I can only work for 16 hours. I mean, I have the capacity and I am capable of doing 20 hours, and I would like to, because I want to get out of the house, but I can only work for 16 hours. Please don't pay me even half an hour extra, because it just messes up my benefits. So it speaks to that as well. Perfectly capable people.
For me, it's called a welfare system, but I really don't see it as a welfare system, because it's kind of a trap for people. Once you're in it, you're trapped, because as soon as you make just a little bit more than the limits are, that's it. You're completely penalized. Whereas if it was structured in a way that, okay, fine, you're making this much more, we'll then just decrease a little bit. But for it to just be completely cut off, it feels like it's been designed to keep certain people in certain situations, because you can't really get out of it. Because if I stop working, I'm going to get the benefits, and I'm going to get a roof over my head. I'm going to get my bills paid for. As soon as I start working, I'm going to struggle to get any of that. And so I can see why and how people just get trapped. And like happened in the story in the book, it's just really needs a huge reworking. And I do still believe 60 years on, we're still in the same situation where we're penalizing people rather than helping them.
I agree. But at the same time, I think it's because of the ideology behind the whole welfare state. I mean, the idea that it provides welfare is maybe because it prevents you from being destitute. It enables you to keep body and soul together, regardless of whether you are thriving or whether you're just simply existing. The main thing is you're not dying on the street. So moving away from like the Victorian poorhouses and therefore having this welfare system. Welfare doesn't mean that you have to be comfortable, because it's punitive, isn't it? You have to simply be living, even if you're just basically scraping by. I mean, if you look at maybe the ideology of something like universal basic income, where the state is giving everybody, I think, as I understand it, a fixed amount, and then it's up to you what you do with that amount. The ideology is totally different to the ideology behind the welfare state, which has been kind of inherited from a Victorian era kind of way of thinking, where you punish. It's about punishing you. Even the whole thing about signing on, you're asked to come in, you're asked to show, have you been doing certain things to try to get this job? Whereas the whole system, the broader system, is structured such that if you're to get a job, maybe it's just a low-level job. It may not be satisfying. It may not provide much more than what you're getting on welfare benefits. And then you might think, what's the point in doing this? I actually get more money through the welfare state than I would if I were to go and, I don't know, work in a factory or something like that. Bearing in mind that in the United Kingdom, much of the industry that used to be there is no longer there.
Yeah.
We're now more of a service sector, financial services kind of provider, aren't we? So I think it's more than just the structure. It's the ideology behind why it's structured in this way as opposed to that way. What are we trying to achieve with the welfare system, and how would we best achieve it if we restructured it? But if it's about keeping people in a certain position, maintaining a certain mindset and view of the world and position it within the world, then I guess it's doing the thing that it's been designed to do.
I don't know that it's been intentionally designed for a certain mindset and to keep people with a certain view of the world. I don't think that was ever intentional, but I think that has been the unintended consequence.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think I was listening to one of the football players, Marcus Rashford, and who has become a very successful football player, and he was saying, without the support of, we would have no food, we would be homeless, we would have nowhere to go. But the unintended consequences have been that it's people then have been kept in that space. And the reason why Ada is very different is that she will thrive and get her sociology degree, whatever degree, and from earning whatever £9 a week, once she's actually got a full-on job, that will be 10 times more. So she will benefit. But for the rest, as you say, if you're a factory worker and you're earning £1 or £2 more, it's impossible. And also the fact that they are saying if you have a husband, then you're penalized. So it's encouraging single women to be single parents.
Or for couples not to live together. Yeah.
But if you're right that it's an unintended consequence, then surely, given the passage of time, if you realize that, okay, you've designed a system and the output of the system is not what you intended it to be, surely you would have been able to tinker with the system and adjust it effectively so that the outcome is what you intend it to be. I
think successive governments have tried. I don't think it's an easy thing to do. And I think the Labour government, when it did come into power with Sure Start and, decent homes, they did try. It's just that now, with the Conservatives being in power for the last 14 years or whatever, and austerity, everything that Labour tried to do basically has been undone. The system, I think, can be changed, and I think it takes a really strong and powerful government to be able to do so. I don't think it's an easy thing to do. So, for example, there's some couples that do not need child benefit. There's some old people that don't need their public transport subsidized. So why are we paying those people child benefits, and why are we subsidizing public transport for people who don't need to?
Maybe because you want to get their votes.
Exactly. And this is why it's a difficult thing to change.
And actually, just going back to the book, what was interesting about even the social welfare worker, Carol, and her participation in maintaining the status quo, the fact that I think she was thriving when these families were really broken, because there was a bit of a power play there. Obviously, Princess would, all she needed to do was to cry a little bit, then she gets a little bit more money. Ada would be funny and make her laugh at her own expense to get grants. And so there's politics at play as well with the social workers. It's a whole ecosystem that needs a complete overhaul. Because I think I was reading somewhere saying, well, if you talk to this person, you might get £4 for an extra pair of shoes, but if it's that person, it would be £11 or so. Already that it's not fair that it's dependent on who you're talking to, as opposed to these are the rules, Yeah. So it feels broken, and if this is continuing today.
Which it is. Yeah. It's continuing today because, I mean, everything has changed, but nothing has really changed. The fundamentals are still the same, aren't they, really? The benefit system is complicated, but I guess it's always going to have to be complicated because you have so many different facets to it. And you have all these people like, what's her name? I've forgotten her name now. Was it Carol? Yes, Carol. That have to administer it. And they become complicit in the whole dependency culture, don't they? Because that's where they get their income, because she's doing a job. But at the same time, on a psychological or personal level, she is invested in them being dependent upon her, and she gains a level of, well, I don't know whether it's power or whether it's status, which they like, but they hate at the same time. It's that love-hate relationship. But at the same time, they buy into it because she's in a position of authority and they need her say-so to get certain things, certain additional benefits, let's just say.
I just found Carol quite conflicting. On the one hand, she held herself out there to be there for them. So, for example, she goes and gets Ada, all these volunteers to come and help with babysitting. And she gets them stuff when, they need it. But at the same time, these people did not know what their rights were. These people were entitled to a whole load of other things and had rights. But at no point was Carol going to them and saying, actually, you have a right to do this, you have a right to do that. So I found her whole character very conflicting. She did help them, yes. She should have been advocating for them a lot more, rather than just, getting them this, and getting them that. She should have been actually telling them, these are your rights, this is what you're entitled to. As you were saying, I think she got some kind of satisfaction from them relying on her and coming to her with all their problems. And then if they did come to her with all their problems, she would then spread it to everybody else. So everybody else knew problems were. So yeah, I don't know, what did you guys feel about Carol?
I mean, I think there are lots of people like Carol in the world. I think slightly mean-spirited in the sense that, just a little bit of power can really corrupt a person, because it makes her feel really important and powerful. And actually, what was interesting, because there was somewhere where Ada says, every time she sees Carol's car parked in the courtyard or something, it's quite comforting. So, I mean, I think mentally they're now probably attached to this woman. And yet it should have been very transactional in the sense that, Ada, your rights are this, this is what the system can offer you. This is what your situation is. And this is how we go forward. But even her introduction, it was all about, even the way they started their relationship. There's a power game that Carol has played with everyone that is distasteful. I think, and should not be found in the workplace. That's not the type of manager or co-worker I would like to be working with.
I wanted to compare and contrast social working then and then social working now, because Caro is aware that Ada goes off and leaves the kids at home on their own. Caro is aware that some of the people in the ditch beat their kids. Caro is aware of the old man whose wife ran off and left him with the kids.
Oh, yes.
She's aware of all of that. What do you think would happen if that happened now in today's overprotective?
Do you know, I and this is very limited knowledge of the social welfare system, but I've read enough stories in the media, especially when it comes to children, when, like Baby P, when something really terrible has happened, and there's been a number of cases where children have been affected. And I followed that very closely. And then when you start to try and separate what actually happened, then you're told, well, 4 or 5 social workers came to visit, and the police like, either they're not talking to each other, or people know something and they are like Carol and just turning a blind eye, and that makes me believe that maybe the system has moved on, but not that much, based on perhaps the sensational media stories that keep popping up, particularly about young children. I
think that there are some instances where children probably slip through the net, but I think part of that is systematic, because there's a shortage of social workers.
Yeah.
Social workers change. One child can have about 5 different social workers in a space of 3 months. And then there's no handover from one social worker to the next. Secondly, funding. There's absolutely no funding. Social workers get paid little amounts of money for the work that they do. And then councils are not funded properly to actually be able to provide the decent service that they should be providing these children. But I also do think if it was today, and Caro is today's social worker and had gone into this flat and found out that Ada was leaving the kids at home by themselves, and especially in that instance where one of the children got burned, Ada wouldn't have any of those children, because I think social workers now are so hyper, how would I describe it, vigilant, that as soon as something really small happens, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be blamed. It's not the council, it's not the managers at the top, it's the little. And if you notice in these media cases that we hear about, it's always a poor social worker at the bottom who's blamed. She's probably had the case for 2 weeks, or she was probably off sick for a long time because she's stressed, but she's the one that gets blamed. So I think, again, I think this is also, or
you say you think there's maybe greater scrutiny on their activities,
mainly because of the cases that you've highlighted. That's why there's a whole lot more scrutiny, and I don't think Ada had done that now, I don't think she would still be allowed to keep the children.
Because I think society has changed, hasn't it, compared to then?
Yeah.
Now there's much more. I don't know whether it's accountability or the issue of you want to pin blame on someone. And so social workers now, I guess they're much more risk averse, because they are ultimately probably going to be the person that is going to be blamed. So if you have a social worker that has a caseload of, I don't know, 40 children or something like that, what are you going to expect, for the social worker to juggle 40 cases? If one case goes south very badly, everyone will pile in on the social worker, forgetting the 39 that the social worker has been juggling, maybe more or less effectively. That's all out the window. Yeah. So it's unreasonable. I mean, they're under-resourced, and there's a reason why many of the social workers, as you said, one child might have, over a short period of time, 5 different social workers. There's a reason, because the system is not working. So people are not staying long-term in one particular position. they're underpaid and overworked.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. This book just made me realize how much so little has changed. If we even if we talk about housing, in the book, Ada's house is filled with mold, right? Only a couple of years ago, did a little boy not die because the council place in which they were living was full of mold? You then think to yourself, but it's 2024. Why do we still have the same issues? So this book for me just made me realize how really very little has changed in terms of the welfare system and how it's provided, and just life for people at the bottom. Life for people is still really, really
tough. And it's true, because I think it's easy to just hear on the news about, 2 million people are on the dole, or however many people, and then you can be judgmental and say, oh, for goodness sake, I'm having to get up at 5 a.m. and go and work, and why can't they? You can't be like that all the time. But then when you start, like, this book just kind of opens up to the world of individuals and how really, really challenging it is to just take that one step to what I call freedom, mental freedom as well as financial freedom. I think it can be extremely, extremely challenging. And from the outside, you don't see it if you don't know enough about it.
If you're a Hampstead, what is it? How is it that was described in the book club discussion the other day? A Hampstead middle class person who read about it and will, shake their head and tut and say how absolutely bad it is, and then they'll go back to living. Then they'll probably write one or two letters to somebody somewhere saying how absolutely bad the system is, and then they'll go back to living their normal usual life because it doesn't really affect them.
As you said, Yvonne, in terms of the issue of mental freedom, there's that passage where Ada has gone to her family advisor, to Carol and the others, and they've had this food, and it says, delicious, said Ada. She was amusing them, and she knew it. For how else could she accept bought food from another woman, knowing quite well that she would never be in a position to pay her back? So she has that insight into the fact that she's not going to be able to return this particular kind of favor. So the only thing she can do in order to retain her sense of self-worth as an adult and to have that kind of autonomy is to give them some amusement so that they can smile, they can laugh at her own expense. Because obviously it doesn't really cost her anything apart from maybe a psychological loss. But she's amusing them in response or in return for what they have then given her. So she sees the imbalance. She sees the fact that there is no way she can materially return the favor. So she returns the favor, as it were, as almost like a jester, as through amusement, through amusing them. But the fact is, she has the insight that she can see what is going on. There's a transaction going on, and she can see it. But she needs to balance the scales. That's what I find fascinating. The fact that she doesn't just accept this as charity and yes, I'll just take everything I can. She recognizes that to retain her personhood, to be able to live with herself quite comfortably, she has to give something back for what she has received. She can't give something materially. She hasn't got any money. She can't pay for it. Let me amuse them.
But I think Ada is obviously different compared to the other ladies because her life trajectory is quite different. And you can see that she moves to a new apartment. She now looks around and realizes, hang on, my kids need to be dressed properly. I'm going to start sewing. She fits into this new, I think she's moved to, is it Richmond? I can't remember where. Hampstead, yes. So she has that mindset that can shift and change and depending on her situation, but she's quite grounded on knowing who she is. Now, what's really challenging for me is, and you mentioned the issue of self-worth, and I was thinking about how even when she first goes to the office to claim, because she's been told you can claim, And the fact that you know, that there's a meeting, and then you don't know when you're going to be told. It could be 2 hours, it could be 2 days, it could be you could run to the toilet, and as she did, and she comes back, her name is called, and she has to wait. I mean, how degrading is that? And I mean, and I was thinking, if I was consistently receiving that type of, I can't call it attention, that type of interaction on a day-to-day basis, I would have no self-esteem. Honestly, I would feel like nothing.
Why is it that you'd feel like nothing, and yet there are people out there who day in, day out go into these offices and claim
and wait 2 days, 2 hours? And actually, Ada was supposed to have a meeting, and she got herself spruced up and ready for the meeting. And then she was told, oh, no, you need to actually look poor because you're looking for money. And then the president turned up, you know, and she was a little bit cross, but everybody thought, oh, it's the most normal thing. And imagine getting to having a life where you just accept second best. And that's your life. I think that's what I find sad about this book.
I have a story about claiming benefits. So in early noughties, I got made redundant.
You mean
Sorry?
your post was made redundant? Because you can never be redundant.
Oh yes, my role was made redundant, and I was also at the same time.
Before you carry on, Taiwo, you make such a fantastic point, which talks to our self-worth, because you'll say I was made redundant, and everybody says that, but
we all say it, yeah.
Yeah.
Suppose it's not us, it's suppose.
Sorry, Jackie, carry on.
Thank you for the correction. But yeah, so I and at that point, my sister was only 8, and my sister lived with me, and didn't have any income coming in. So I was like, okay, let me go and see. I've worked, I've paid into the system. Let me go and see, if I'm entitled to anything. I tell you, it was the most humiliating experience I have ever been through. And I said to myself, this is never, ever, ever happening to me again, ever. I'd rather just, starve than have to go through this. And thank goodness, up to this day, I put away money. I make sure that I have something that I can live on. And even if I have to go and stack shelves in a supermarket, I'll go and stack shelves in a supermarket than go through that experience again.
Do you think, and just narrating your story, I was just thinking, and you were saying, but why do people accept? Because I was like, it's so humiliating. But don't you think that the people that perhaps have been generationally on the dole know the system so well, it's almost like their full-time job to understand how they can get that extra £5 or £10 or whatnot. Whereas you who've worked all your life, you're out in the cold and you will feel ashamed because you're like, but then you say to yourself, no, but I've worked, I've paid into the system. You'll have these debates, I guess, with yourself. But I think it's easy.
It wasn't even the fact that I would say, I'm going to go and ask for a handout. It was more how they make you feel, how they treat you. It was just like, I'm human just like you. I've just fallen into, it's a bad time for me right now. This is not my doing up. I haven't woken up today and decided that I'm not going to work.
Mm.
I was working. It's just unfortunate that my role is no longer there. Mm. But the way they speak to you is so belittling.
But do you think there's an element of conditioning on the part of the person that has for many decades or years worked into who they think they are as a person within, or where they fit within society? And also another kind of conditioning for a person who maybe generationally has never worked. So they've seen their mum, their dad, their uncle ducking and diving, playing the system, getting whatever benefits they can get, and then whatever falls off the back of a lorry, they're down the pub flogging it or whatever. But there's conditioning on both sides of the coin. Do you not think so?
No, I absolutely agree. I think because I've always been brought up with the mentality that you work and you make a life for yourself. Whereas with
But do you not think, Jackie, but do you not think, and I'm now putting myself in the person that is interviewing you,
yeah,
you know, I mean, their full-time job, I would probably say 95% of the time, they're seeing the person who's constantly every single day. And then probably 1% of the time, they're seeing you or 2 or 3 of you. And then, of course, probably when they start the conversation, they know the drill because they think it's you know, it's the usual. It's business as usual. And until you start becoming defiant and you start saying, you know, I've just finished my job. I was doing this. I am looking for a job that's going to earn me this amount. At that point, I'm sure, or I hope, they start sort of looking up and being less mean.
I didn't find, unfortunately, that was not my experience at all. They just kind of just spoke to everybody in the same way. There was no empathy, there was no humanity.
Although to be fair, I mean, if you're doing a job where every time you're saying computer says no, computer says no, computer says no, day in, day out, you're being paid tuppence.
No funding.
You know? Yeah, and it's just a McJob. And you probably have a screen or a grill protecting you from the public who spit on you, who try to assault you, etc., day in, day out. Then I can understand, because, okay, if you flip the script, if rather than your post being made redundant, if you had to leave that job due to ill health, let's say MS or chronic fatigue syndrome or something that prevented you from working ever again, so you're going to have to go long term for the rest of your life on benefits, but your disability is not something that is obvious, you're going to have to suck it up.
So suck up that treatment, basically, you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, no, but because
I'm not saying it's right. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just trying to understand why and how people, because when they start out working in the welfare benefit office, they wouldn't have started out like that, I hope. But over a period of time, you get ground down.
When they started out, they themselves at some point were also job hunting, you know, so you want to show a little kindness. Doesn't seem evident.
But I'm hoping that someone who could never work again, they wouldn't have to have these interactions every week. I had to go, I think I had to go every week. Was it every week? Yeah.
To be fair, Jackie, you know, the other thing that I was reading not too long ago, I think it was actually last week, and, okay, it wasn't the Daily Mail, but there's a gang of Bulgarians who, did you read the story about how they basically swindled the system, the benefit system, out of something in the tune of 20 million in the last sort of 4 or 5 years? There are people that are trying to defraud the system as well. So they have to be vigilant, but it doesn't mean they have to be unkind. That you're right.
Mm-hmm. We've kind of dissected and dissed and done everything to the welfare system. I want to move on to racism and discrimination. How do you think issues of racism and discrimination are depicted in the book, and do they affect Ada's journey and her interaction with others?
There was that instance, wasn't there, in the laundrette, when I think by then she's becoming quite seasoned in living in the ditch.
Yeah.
And so the old Ada would have kind of capitulated, but the new Ada has become quite hardened and more experienced, let's just say, to living in that kind of environment. So the woman who was, I'm not sure whether she was trying to cheat or whether she wasn't allowing Ada to use a washing machine or use.
Basically, she was ironing her sheets, but she was spreading them all over, and basically she was not giving Ada any space to put her stuff into. Yes.
But Ada stood her ground, didn't she?
And Ada, I think, took some very unsavory looking, shall we just say, undergarments and put them on top and told her you might have to rewash your...
So it's almost like calling the woman's bluff. And I think the woman was kind of questioning, where you from, you know, you're from outside or something like that. But then the people kind of supported Ada, didn't they, and saying, you're only, is it one generation away, or yes, you've got white skin, but
And
You're not
also,
English.
what gave Ada the confidence is because she could tell that this woman was not actually English. She might be Caucasian. And then Mrs. Williams says, she's actually Greek. So implying that she too is a foreigner.
Exactly.
Aren't most people in the UK foreigners? I mean, if you take it back far enough, the Boris Johnsons, whether it's from Turkey or wherever,
Yeah, but they've got white skin, Taiwo. That's the difference.
Well, you're wearing your passport, aren't you? You're wearing your passport. That's all it is.
Yeah. The other instance of, I guess, race and how it comes across in the book. So people kept referring to every Black person as your people. And then you had the instance, in fact, in the benefits office, where she's sitting and then this woman starts talking to her. And I found this interesting, where she was saying she's met some Nigerians or people from West Africa, and the majority of them are well-to-do people. So she was quite surprised that Ada was in the benefits office. And I think she was telling Ada to be aspirational like the rest of her people.
So like you don't belong here.
Yeah.
Or is this Mrs. Wilkinson that was saying only Nigerian failures stay in England? You don't really like it here, do you? You don't really like it here.
Oh, yes, because she was surprised that Ada said, oh, I like it here. And it was inferred that Ada would have been the first person to have ever said that to
But at the same time, Ada is thinking, what am I supposed to say? What is this white woman expecting to hear from me? So she's kind of almost, is it Orwellian or Kafkaesque? That kind of the double think. No, it's Orwell, isn't it? The double think.
Funny enough, the whole issue of racism, I think for me, it was more about some of her thought processes, even like when she's about to do something, because that whole thing of, I think there was an incident right at the beginning when she moves into the mansion with the lighting up.
Light.
Yes. And she says, well, I think sometimes if you act stupid as a Black person, white people warm up to you, so let me play into that narrative, And I was just thinking, actually, I wonder if, and I think it happens that a lot of Black people, we make a lot of effort in making others feel comfortable, even if it's at our own expense. And I remember, and it can happen even in the workplace, particularly in the workplace, where you let things slide just to keep the peace. And I remember thinking to myself the other day at my last employer that, you know what, I'm going to say exactly what I'm thinking, and I'm going to let you sit in that discomfort. And I'm not moving my gaze. Because
how did that go down?
It made people very uncomfortable, but I was very proud of myself because one of the things I said is that I need to be courageous. Somebody always needs to be the first. And to be fair, I mean, if you're sitting in an office where there's 200 white people and there's only like 5 Blacks, I was saying to myself, for the next Black person that sits on this chair, they should be treated with a little bit more respect. I will say things that will make you very uncomfortable, but I will allow you to sit in that discomfort. I will not soften it up. I won't soften the blow because no one softens it for me. No one ever does. They kind of hit you left, right, and center. And Black people have always been the ones that try and I see it even when white people, I remember when I lived in Harare, let a white person fly in Harare International Airport. People fall all over a white person and do everything possible to make that white person feel at home, feel comfortable. It's who we are, yes. And yet we've been taken advantage of. And I found Ada in a few instances playing out that what can I do to maybe fit in, to make the other person feel comfortable? Maybe let me be funny and even at my own expense. I think blacks must stop. It makes you feel uncomfortable. We sit quietly, and I will not say another word to soften you, to make you feel better. No, let's sit in the discomfort. Let it sink in so that you understand your wrongs. But obviously, you can see I'm quite limited.
Obviously, Yvonne wasn't trying to get promoted in the last question.
No. And I think I think you bring a very good point, Taiwo. I think, the lady is 26, so it's quite different, probably. Although, to be fair, you are 26. The other thing I thought, you're 20 and you've got 5 children.
I know.
And none of them are twins. None of them are twins. But Taiwo, you're right. I think it comes with age. When you get into your 40s, 50s, you have a strong sense of who you are and who you want to be. And whatever space I'm taking, I'm becoming more and more unapologetic. But obviously, if you go back to the book, she plays into that because, yes, it benefits her because she gets a bit more money and more grant there, this. But that race thing it irritates me when I find Black people trying to please white people. I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Not please them, but make them feel comfortable to soften the blow. But when somebody has hit you with a really racist thing.
I completely understand and I agree with you. And I think sometimes, we're afraid because then they're going to say, oh no, she's playing the racism card, or oh no, not another, racist issue. And I think because we allow that to happen, and then it makes people comfortable saying things they do and doing the things they do. Whereas if we stood up to them like you did, more people would think twice before saying some of the things that they say.
But I think it's because that's why it's very challenging to be a Black person in this particular society. Because, for example, a lady you'll go to a shop and a lady, you want to buy a pair of shoes. You've got the money. All I want to do is to buy a pair of shoes. The money's in my pocket. You get maybe no one serves you, someone looks away, they, look, there could be a number of scenarios. It could be this lady who's behind the counter has had a big issue at home and she is sort of thinking about that. And it's not really about you, so it's not racist. It could be 5, 6, 7, 8 things. But once you've eliminated those, there's always a 6th one where it could be because I'm Black. You see, this is the challenge for us.
Yeah.
You can play out a number of scenarios in your head, and then you have to actually say, oh,
is it not?
Actually, and I'll tell you funny enough, sorry, I'm totally digressing because this happened to me 2 days ago. So I have a toothache. I still have it. And I go to my private dentist and he says, oh, I think it's like gum infection. You need antibiotics. So I take my prescription and I go to Boots Pharmacy and I hand it to the Polish, I found out later, Polish lady behind the counter. She looks at it, she looks at me and she says, yeah, this is private, so you have to pay. I said, okay. And then she goes away and comes back. She says, yes, no, it's definitely not NHS. You will have to pay for that. I said, I heard the first time. So, and the reason why I then concluded it concluded the reason because there were 2 people in front of me. The first thing she'd put it through, do you pay your own prescription or do you, or not? There was just a question, do you pay or not? And they'll say yes or no, yes or no. For mine, it was, you do have to pay. I said, oh, okay. I just thought I'd let you know. I said.
But Yvonne, how were you dressed?
I think I heard it the first time. I was wearing my.
Were you dressed in rags and burlap and sackcloth?
So they assume that the lone Black woman wandering around in the pharmacy can only be, And then how it played out was actually quite sort of remarkable. it reminded me of this George Floyd thing that swept aside. So I say to her, yeah, sure, you know. So, and then of course I just like, I can give you that kind of like, yeah. I went to a private dentist. I paid him, so I will pay for the prescription. And then an English lady who was behind the counter, who had watched this whole thing play out, turned to her colleague and said, I think the lady has said she pays for her prescription. And that's the end of the story. And then she walked away. I stood there. I was like, oh, okay. So now I've got someone defending me. Yay. But it's still not yay. What? And this prescription was £5.99. I mean, we're not talking. Wow. So you asked me 3 times.
Yvonne, do you find that when
£5.99?
It was £5.99. The prescription
Yvonne,
that I had to pay.
Something like £30, £40.
No, it was £5.99. So she's looked at me, and whether it's because maybe she hasn't seen a black customer that day. So this is what I was saying about the whole thing, that as a black person, we're so challenged in this environment, because you can say, oh, she was having a bad day, oh, this happened, oh, her child was sick. But I'm sorry, but reason number 4 is because I'm black. Can only be.
But I feel that there's a short circuit in the person's brain where when you say the affirmative, you say, okay, I agree with what you're saying, it doesn't compute.
I say it quite casually, like, yeah, because I pay, in my head, I was like, I pay for my prescriptions anyway, so.
It doesn't compute. It doesn't compute.
Yeah.
They haven't really taken in what you said. They haven't really read your body language, that you're not bothered.
I'm not bothered.
So they keep themselves, so they get into one of those kind of loops.
Yes.
Where they keep teaching themselves. And
then her colleague said, yeah, she said she pays, and she's okay. It will take 10 minutes to go and get it prepared. And then of course when she's calling me, Mrs. Bagas, Mrs. Burgess, I said, that's me. I didn't correct her. Took my prescription, tapped it, I walked away. So, I mean, these are a lot of the sort of microaggressions that, you know, I mean, we sort of laugh about it, but these are day-to-day occurrences. And as Black women or men, we just sort of shrug them off. But it's an everyday thing.
So I guess what you're saying is that if we challenge them, it would happen less.
Yes, like in fact, like Ada challenged at the, you know, and you might actually start getting support, you know, at the laundrette. Yeah.
So people would reflect before they then started making these assumptions or saying some of the things that they say.
And I think you don't have to be rude, you don't have to be loud, but you have to say it. Mm-hmm. You say it very quietly, and you don't sugarcoat it. Yeah.
What if they start crying?
If they start crying, what?
Yeah.
I remember white tears. White tears are very powerful.
Are they?
Yeah, they're not like ordinary tears.
Well, darling, sit in your discomfort, cry it out, but go home and reflect on it.
But do you really think that people do go home and reflect?
I think
people get defensive.
Oh yeah, naturally. Because what happens if someone sort of if anyone, even for us, you know, if you think someone's attacked you, the first thing is you try to be defensive. But sometimes, if you feel it's true, sit in that discomfort. You know,
just own it and apologize.
Own it. And I'm realizing more and more, even as a parent, you know, like my daughter will say, "Oh, Mom, you always do this." And you know, instinctively, like, oh, for goodness sake, you know, like the typical African parent. I was like, no, actually, let me sit in this discomfort and hear what she has to say. And then there could be some truth in it, you know? Yeah. Therefore, I think it pays to listen and not just be defensive.
At the same time, I think Ada is able to realize that there are instances where she can use her race to her advantage. So when she got the offer, I mean, you know, when she was trying to leave the place she was living before she entered the ditch.
Yeah.
And she needed to get away from the nasty Nigerian landlord who was doing his useless juju, which had no effect anyway on her. But anyway, she took the first thing that became available, didn't she? She just jumped straight into it. It's like, where I am now, it can't be any worse. Where I'm going to go to, whatever the council offers. But then by the time she became seasoned and she'd been in the ditch for a while, and they're moving people on and they're offering people, and she learns that no, you don't have to take the first offer. You don't even have to take the second offer. You have a number of chances or offers, maybe 2 or 3 or something like that. So she goes there, and then she wants to tell the clerk or the girl in the office, and the girl in the office assumes that she doesn't understand English or doesn't understand English adequately.
Yes, I remember that.
She says, "Don't you understand English?" The girl clerk demanded, exasperated. No want that house. No want. Adam replied, shaking her head like a toothless baby. And it always makes me laugh, the kind of the description of, shaking her head like a toothless baby. This is an educated immigrant woman, but she's pretending to say she's totally uneducated because she knows that she wants to reject that offer, and that's the best way to get the outcome that she wants. So she's gaming the system. She's learned how to game the system.
But yeah, I like, and I think the two, that's its scenario, and then the one that Yvonne described earlier on, I like how she's able to analyze the situation and then see what part of Ada is going to come out in that moment. But then the other thing that I like actually is how she grows in the book. So she starts off from this person who is trying to please everybody and trying to make sure that people like her, to this woman who actually kind of knows what she wants and knows how she's going to play or game the system or try and use the system to then get to where she wants to go. Although, having said that, she is still a bit conflicted sometimes. She's really
very soft. She's soft, isn't she? She's quite sensitive.
Yeah. She's really not sure whether although she understands that she is using the system, she's not sure that she should be using the system. Just like when she goes to Carol to get all those things that Carol gets for her, she's not sure she should actually be there using Carol to get the stuff, but at the same time, she needs the stuff. She needs to go there to drink the coffee to keep warm.
But she's human as well, because even at the meetings that they attend about Carol, she's a little bit conflicted because she knows she's one of the people that's benefited from Carol and is now standing there saying, they want us to stay poor or whatever, I liked one of her last conversations because I think she goes back to the market, to the area where she had lived, and she's now sort of looks quite nice, and she meets what's her name? I can't remember the girl who's pregnant.
Whoopi,
yes, she meets Whoopi, and Whoopi is a bit Whoopi, like I've got this man, and he's my neighbor, and we're in love, and I might go to his country, and all this, and it's all sort of pipe dreams. And what's really lovely is Ada, in her mind, knows that she's decided that this is not going to amount to anything. But she chooses not to share this. And I was like, that's nice. That's mature. That's kind.
Yeah. And I also like her comments about how all these African students who come to the UK treat the white women that they get involved with. And that brings me to my next point, I think. When we discussed this at the book club, there was a feeling that this was really a social commentary, that it wasn't necessarily just a novel. This is actually her passing commentary on society and on the way things.
A Ken Loach film in written form.
Yeah. And especially because some of these is taken from articles that she'd written for the New Statesman.
I mean, it is relatable because, I mean, even right at the start of the novel, the fact that she lives with one of her fellow countrymen who treats her really, really badly. I mean, it's quite widely known that, like, I hear a lot of Zimbabweans saying, my gosh, the worst person to live with, or when you move into this country, it's not a Zimbabwean because they will treat you the worst. I mean, I hear that the people from your own country are the ones that will, instead of actually helping you, guiding you, making your life a lot easier, they don't, and that's how she plays out this novel, which I thought was actually quite amusing.
Also, when she's talking about her son, Boo Boo, and she says, "In a while, the world will teach you what color your girlfriend is. Before even you kiss chase her, you think of her color first." And I felt that she's really understanding that the whole issue of black and white. He's what? How old is Boo Boo? 4.
But no, but Boo Boo didn't know though at the beginning because
This is the thing, I couldn't understand that. I was like, Boo Boo, have you not learned your colors?
he hadn't. He's a child.
Because
He doesn't see
I was saying,
color.
when I was reading that, I was thinking, when my daughter will say to me, she doesn't go around referring people by their color, but she'll say, "Mommy," she just says the color she sees. "I'm dark peach." That's what she says. Or this is black, or this, like she knows colors. So I couldn't understand why he couldn't just say what color she was, unless she's mixed. I couldn't make sense of that.
She was mixed. She was mixed.
Yeah. The girlfriend.
Yeah. But I also think that this is where the social commentary element comes in, because I think the author's writing this later on, and she's trying to use this to make a point about race and color and how you get conditioned as you grow up. And the final thing, I guess, that we haven't touched on is women and the role of feminism. And so how do you think that she confronts gender roles? And how does the book address the theme of feminism and women's independence?
Well, she does talk about separated women not being allowed to have fancy men, doesn't she?
Yep.
The phrase for men friends. But that's all within the structure of the welfare state and entitlement to certain benefits, and how that will impact once the state knows that a woman is in a relationship.
But the book itself is about women, isn't it?
Any of the men that are in this book are not portrayed in a positive light. Actually, there's not even a mention, because I was thinking, you've got 5 children, you're 26. At some point, does the father not sort of take them to the park? Like, there is absolutely no mention. And there's a part where she's very, very sick. Yes. And you'd think that the father figure, however mean he is or wherever he is, might step in, and no, nothing. It was the friends who stepped in. All the male figures are they're not positive in any form or shape. I'm trying to think.
Papa Jaja.
No, what was the
Nigerian man?
Papa Jaja? And I know he'd had a wife in Nigeria, and this was his second wife, and he's got these 5 children with this white woman. She's run off again. I didn't understand the relevance of even. Can someone explain to me?
Well, I think that was again the part of the social commentary bit of it, how these African men with wives already in Africa come here. And then
that's simple. Okay.
They then get children with white women, and then they never leave to go back to their homes. So basically abandon their first wives and their kids at home.
And when the white women run away, evidently they can't cook for their children either, because I think it was boiling the potatoes.
But also I think that's also the other element to that, I think, is this sense of community. Because if you think about it, the people in the ditch actually are really a community, and that's why some of them did not want to leave, because of the fear that they're going to lose that sense of community. And that's something that we're lacking now. We don't really have, well, I don't, and I don't think anywhere I've lived, I've had that sense of community where neighbors pop in and out and help each other and just do things together. But here you have a situation where a man is struggling, and these women get together and go and help him out. They put the kids to bed. They make sure that they're well fed. So,
and it's so interesting you're saying this, because it really feeds into this narrative of, I don't know if you've heard of the term Ubuntu, which is I am because we are.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because in our Shona culture, if you're saying good morning, if you say to someone good morning, Marara say, I'm going to say it in the language. The response is Tarara kana mararao. We have slept well if you have slept well. Yes, and actually another what I've just thought of is when someone sort of like there's a wedding or there's a graduation, and then people say Makorokoto means congratulations. People won't say, oh, thank you. They'll say, no, the congratulations are for us all. We are all celebrating. It's so all the answers are about you may be asked a question about you, but the response is we. And you're so right that we is lacking. And it's something that was, I think that's really the only reason that those women, those families wanted to stay in the mansion, because that community, including Mean Carol.
Yeah, there was that neighborliness, wasn't there, where people support each other, but at the same time, everyone knows everyone else's business.
Yes.
But also it was women, really, if you think about it. It was just a community of women. There were the men that were there were, so you had the one that was kept at home by, I think it was the O'Neills, where the wife decided that he couldn't go to work, or people thought that he was working on the side and working for cash. Then you had the one that was kicked out by the wife because he was just a drunk and did nothing. And then all the others were single women. It was the women
the only positive.
Sorry?
The only positive males were the students, wasn't it, Jerry?
Oh.
I like the students.
Yes, the one that came to help her with the children. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's also interesting. That also made me think that, so when she was expecting the worst, when they said they were sending students to come and look after the kids, and when she came back, they'd cleaned the house, they'd done all sorts of things, and they were just sitting on the sofa, watching TV. And then, so you had this idea, and then I think we still do today. We have this idea that students are dirty, they're this, they're that. Whereas actually they were quite very conscientious, they were activists, they were clean. So for me, that kind of made me chuckle, and it actually made me think, actually, yeah, students get a bad name for nothing.
And funny enough, just talking about expecting the worst. So when she first moved into the mansion, she had that initial situation where her neighbors were like, because they didn't want her to make any noise, they were complaining about her children, and she couldn't even use her sewing machine. So I was now gripped with, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to this woman? Her life is going to be hell. And of course, I was pleasantly surprised when all these networks of friendships and support just started emerging and growing, which was quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a thought. Would that camaraderie, that network, that closeness develop in the middle class community?
Do you think they would be going into each other's houses in that way? Because the houses might be detached houses, or maybe they'd be apartments, but I don't think they'd be popping into each other's houses in the way that the working class people did.
I think it's more about being a bit judgy. I think people, when they have a little bit of money, it's, I wonder what car they're driving. Oh, what's new car? There is that. Oh, I wonder if this is what, I think there is.
Keeping up with the Jones.
Yes, I think there is that with middle class. Whereas, I mean, if you're all trying to haggle, you've got a pound here, a pound there, the pretense is gone. And then I think the friendships emerge.
Well, I think that's it. Yeah, score out of 5. What did you think of it? Would you recommend it?
I'd recommend it. I mean, it's easy to read, and the characters they're interesting. Yeah, they're interesting characters. There are a lot of them. Yeah, it's definitely very accessible, which is what I liked about it. And the Great Rat as well, even though it wasn't a great rat, but she named it the Great Rat. I liked the way she gave these things character, as it were. I'd give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
I'd recommend it.
That's right. Yvonne?
Yeah, I loved it. It took me a day. Well, actually less than a day. I literally, because I found it engaging, warm. I enjoyed the characters. There were you're quite right, Taiwo. There were quite a lot of different characters, but I think that didn't disturb me in any way. Like when is it Judge? I was like, okay, who's this? But very, very quickly I knew who he was and his story. So yes. I like the fact that, yes, I get a new name and 1 or 2 pages later, I know everything that I need to know. You know what I mean? It doesn't get dragged out and I'm wondering. And so I really like that. I'm still puzzled how she has 6 children at the age of 26, but that's probably me in 2024 with that lens.
Well, someone did say birth control. Someone did say there wasn't as much, birth control was not as accessible as it is now. Because it's not just her. Most of the ladies also have quite a lot of children. Yeah, so I agree with both of you. I think it's a very readable book. It's very accessible. What I found really fascinating is that I was reading all these things and thinking, yeah, nothing's changed. Yeah, nothing's changed. In that respect, it was quite depressing that all the things that she's describing them can actually see today. I can hear about it in the news. I can read it in newspapers. So that part of it was quite sad because it just shows that really we haven't moved on over almost 60 years later. But with regards to the book itself, I was afraid that we might find it dated, given as, you know, it's set in the 60s and she's describing the system in the 60s, but actually it wasn't. I loved her style of writing, so simple and yet so effective. And I like the way she just, I mean, it's a book where nothing happens, right? But she just describes so many things and she raises so many issues that we've ended up speaking for the last hour and a half. And it's only a very small book. So the fact that she can put all of that in such a small book and have us talking about it for so long, I think is testament to what a good book it is. I would definitely recommend it. I really enjoyed it. And I think I would give it, I don't think I can give it a 4. The 3.75, I would say.
Yvonne, what mark did you give it?
I gave it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm looking forward to reading Second Class Citizen.
And you said Second Class Citizen is the one where, this is the one before this?
Yes, Second Class Citizen is where she goes back and then she describes how she left her husband. The circumstances which led her to leaving her husband.
She was born in 1944, which is the same year as my mother, so she would have been 80 this year. But then that's made me realize what a powerful, formidable woman, you know? Because obviously then you start comparing with women of her generation. I think my mom was just trying to put her head down, do her nurse training, and, you know, it's just the courage, the fact that, you know, I can be a writer. Actually, I can do it. And she did it. And she's the same age as my mother. It's, for me, it's remarkable. And writing so well as well.
With 5 kids.
Yeah, because that Guardian article about her.
Alone.
The Guardian article about her said that she left her husband when he burnt her manuscript. That was like the final straw for Buchi Emecheta. So, yeah. Difficulties. Lots of difficulties, I guess.
Men.
And you know, when a man has the courage to do that, he's done 100 times more nasty things to get to that point.
I thought that was just so bad, you know. How can someone do that, you know? You burn someone's manuscript.
Back then, you didn't really have computers with backup copies, did you? You just typed everything on a typewriter.
Yeah.
Men.
Taiwo says men.
It's her, it's Jackie that's saying men.
Was it Jackie? Oh, sorry.
Not me.
I think I should correct myself and say some men.
Yes.
Correct myself. Not all men. Some men are good.
Yes. Yeah. But there's a good bunch that are challenging.
That's true.
Thank you guys for really engaging conversation. So thank you so much. And it was a wonderful discussion. And I shall speak to you guys again soon. And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this or any of our other episodes, please like, share or subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Till next time, goodbye.